There is a second life you live every night, when you do not remember. A place where you are not your name, your profession, or your possessions. In this silent realm, you are an architect of worlds, a time traveler, a god, and a monster. Have you ever stopped to think about the audacity of this? That a part of you, every night, breaks free from the chains of reality and enacts dramas of power, fear, love, and death with a single purpose: to deliver you a message. The most curious part, the secret that modern psychology has tried to muffle, is that this message is not a code to hide your shameful desires. It is the exact opposite. It is your soul, in its purest and wildest form, desperately trying to show you the way back home, to your true center. The dream is not the lock, it is the key. And the truth it reveals is so powerful it could rewrite the entire script of your waking life. But for that, you need to learn how to listen. This journey we are about to embark on is not for the casually curious. It is for those who feel the weight of an unlived life, for those who sense there is something more beyond the surface. If you are ready to claim the map of your own soul, then your journey begins now. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single step of this expedition into your inner world. Activate the bell to be notified when a new portal opens. Like this video as a sign that you accept the call. And most importantly, leave the word journey in the comments, so I know you are committed to going all the way. Now, take a deep breath. The descent is about to begin. At the core of every human being resides an ocean. During the day, we navigate its calm, sunlit surface of consciousness, believing this thin layer of water is all that exists. We map our routes, set our destinations, and take pride in our little boat, the ego, which gives us the illusion of control and identity. We call this reality. However, when night falls and the sun of reason sets, we are pulled down into the dark, abyssal depths of this inner ocean. This is the realm of the unconscious, a vast, ancient, and pulsating world filled with strange life forms, sunken treasures, and sleeping monsters. Dreams are the nightly expeditions our soul takes into this submerged world. The silent call we feel, that restlessness, that sense that something essential is missing in our lives, is not a manufacturing defect. It is the nostalgia for the ocean. It is our deep self, the self, calling us to dive beyond the surface and explore the vastness of who we truly are. Modern society, with its incessant noise and its worship of logic and productivity, has taught us to fear these depths. We label dreams as just dreams, meaningless fragments of a resting brain, so we can remain safe in our little boat, ignoring the call of the sirens who sing the truths of our soul. But the ocean is patient. If we do not visit it voluntarily through introspection and dream analysis, it will come to us. It will send storms in the form of anxiety crises, tsunamis in the form of depression, or cause sea monsters to emerge in the form of psychosomatic symptoms and self-destructive behaviors. The call of the unconscious is not a polite invitation. It is a demand from life itself that we become whole. The journey to understand dreams is, therefore, the most crucial of all adventures. It is the decision to stop being a surface sailor and become a deep diver, a courageous explorer of your own infinite inner landscape. Each dream image, no matter how bizarre, is an air bubble rising from the depths, bringing with it a sample of the climate and geography of your soul. To learn to decipher these samples is to learn the way back to the source of all meaning, power, and healing. The question that arises is not if you will answer the call, but when. And with every night you ignore it, the voice gets a little louder, the ocean a little rougher, because the psyche, like nature, always seeks balance, with or without our conscious permission. Your most important adventure does not happen under the sun, but under the pale light of the moon, in the silent theater of your mind. To understand the magnitude of Carl Jung's revolution, we must first visit the house that Sigmund Freud built. Freud, the great pioneer, was the first to take dreams seriously, to treat them not as divine omens or indigestion, but as a significant product of the psyche. In his view, the house of the mind had a respectable facade consciousness and a dark, locked basement, the unconscious. In this basement, we had our most primitive and socially unacceptable desires, mainly of a sexual and aggressive nature. Dreams, for Freud, were the steam escaping from the overheated boiler of this basement. However, so that the steam would not shock the resident upstairs consciousness, an internal censor disguised it. transforming the latent content, the raw desire, into manifest content. The bizarre story of the dream. The analyst's task was therefore that of a detective, breaking the code, deciphering the disguise to reveal the shameful secret hidden in the basement. This view, though brilliant, was fundamentally reductive and pathologizing. It assumed that the unconscious was a cunning enemy, a cauldron of infidel drives that needed to be controlled and exposed. The dream was a symptom, an act of concealment. Jung, who was at first Freud's heir apparent, began to feel that this house was too small. His work with patients and his own profound self-analysis revealed that the basement was not just a repository for repressed desires. It was also an ancestral library, an art gallery, a sacred temple. The unconscious contained not only personal debris, the personal unconscious, but also the treasures of humanity, the collective unconscious. Jung's revolution was to transform the dream from an act of hiding to an act of revealing. For him, the dream is not a censor, but a poet. It does not use symbols to disguise, but because symbols are the only language capable of expressing the complex and paradoxical truths of the soul, which the linear logic of consciousness cannot grasp. The dream is not trying to deceive us, it is trying to teach us. It is a natural and creative expression of the psyche, which seeks to compensate for the one-sidedness of our conscious attitude. If we are excessively rational, dreams will bring emotion. If we are too materialistic, dreams will bring spirituality. The dream is the helping hand of inner nature, trying to guide us back to balance, to the center, to the path of individuation. This changed the role of the analyst from a detective to a translator or a guide. The question ceased to be, what is this dream hiding? And became, what is this dream, in its wisdom, trying to show me now? Jung freed us from the prison of the Freudian basement and gave us the keys to a vast castle, showing that the unconscious is not our enemy, but our deepest and wisest ally on the journey to become who we truly are. Imagine you are trying to describe the experience of falling in love or the pain of grief to someone who has never felt it. Would you use logical words, equations? No. You would resort to metaphors, to poetry, to images. You would say, my heart is on fire, or I feel an echoing emptiness. This is the symbolic language, the only one capable of conveying the complexity of a lived experience. The soul, the unconscious, speaks in exactly this language. When Jung states that dreams reveal rather than hide, he is telling us that the strangeness of dreams is not a disguise, but rather the most precise and honest way the psyche has found to communicate an inner truth. A symbol is not the same as a sign. A stop sign has a single, clear meaning: stop the car. It is exhausted in its function. A symbol, on the other hand, is an image charged with energy and multiple meanings. It is never exhausted. Think of the symbol of the serpent. In one dream, it might represent betrayal, danger. In another, it might symbolize healing and renewal, as in the caduceus of Mercury. In a third, it could be the Kundalini energy, the primordial life force. The meaning is not in the serpent itself, but in the dreamer's relationship to it, in the context of the dream, and at that person's moment in life. This is why dream dictionaries are a dangerous trap. They treat symbols as if they were signs, offering fixed, dead interpretations that ignore the living soul of the dreamer. The language of dreams is pictorial and dramatic because it addresses not just our intellectual mind, but our entire being, our emotions, our instincts, our body. A dream where you are naked in public, for example, is not saying the word vulnerability. It makes you feel the vulnerability in every cell of your being. The message is experiential, not conceptual. It is a rehearsal for life. The unconscious uses this language because it thinks in images and patterns, not words. It is an older, more primordial mode of cognition that we all possess. The task of dream analysis is, therefore, an act of poetic translation. It is to sit with the image, honor it, feel it, and ask, where else in my life do I feel this way? What part of me does this image represent? The image of a ruined house in a dream might be the perfect representation of the current state of your marriage, or your health, or your belief structure. The image contains a holistic wisdom that, if translated into words, would fill pages. Dreams force us to exit the tyranny of literalness and enter the world of as if. They invite us to think metaphorically about our lives, to see the hidden patterns behind everyday events. By learning to speak, or rather, to feel the symbolic language of the soul. We open a direct channel of communication with the deepest source of wisdom we possess. In the grand theater of your dreams, the characters who take the stage are not mere random extras. They are the personification of primordial energies, of patterns of behavior and imagery that have existed since the dawn of humanity. Jung called them archetypes. They are like the dry riverbeds of the psyche. The personal experience of each of us is the water that gives them life and form. They reside in the collective unconscious, a psychic inheritance shared by all human beings. And they manifest in our myths, fairy tales, religions, and most intimately, in our dreams. The archetype of the shadow is perhaps the most common and the most misunderstood. It is our other self, our dark sibling. It contains everything we have rejected in ourselves to build a socially acceptable persona. Our anger, our envy, our greed, our inappropriate sexuality, but also, paradoxically, our undeveloped talents, our repressed creativity, our raw strength. In dreams, the shadow often appears as a figure of the same sex who chases, attacks, or shames us. The ego's natural tendency is to flee from it or try to kill it. However, the Jungian journey demands the opposite, to turn around, confront the shadow, dialogue with it, and integrate its energy. For in the darkness of the shadow lies the gold, the vitality, and the authenticity that we lack in our conscious life. The archetype of the anima in a man and the animus in a woman represents our psychic counterpart, the inner soul. The anima is the personification of all feminine psychological tendencies in a man's psyche mood. Relational ability, feeling, connection to nature and the unconscious. In a man's dreams, she may appear as an unknown female figure, a muse, a sorceress, or a damsel in distress. The development and integration of the anima connect a man to his own soul. The animus in a woman represents the masculine side, logical thinking, assertiveness, courage, spirit. He may appear in dreams as a male figure, a committee of judging men, a warrior, or a sage. Integrating the animus gives a woman access to her power of discernment and action in the world. We often project these archetypes onto real partners, falling in love not with the person, but with our own soul reflected in them. Dreams help us withdraw these projections and develop these qualities internally. The wise old man or the great mother are archetypes of wisdom and nourishment. They appear in moments of crisis or confusion, offering guidance, a magical object, or enigmatic advice. It could be a teacher, a spiritual guide, a grandmother, or a goddess. Their presence in a dream is a sign that the psyche is mobilizing its deepest resources to help the ego overcome an obstacle. Finally, the hero is the archetype that personifies the ego on its journey of individuation. The hero's myth, the humble birth, the call to adventure, the fight against the dragon, the shadow, the status quo, the winning of the treasure, expanded consciousness, and the return to renew the kingdom is the fundamental story of every human life in search of meaning. When you dream that you are fighting, overcoming challenges, or embarking on a journey, it is your inner hero being activated. Recognizing these archetypal characters in your dreams is like receiving a map of your own personal myth. It is understanding that your small personal life is connected to the great drama of human existence. The psyche, like the body, is a self-regulating system. The body maintains homeostasis, a constant temperature, a balanced blood pH. The psyche does the same, and its primary instrument for maintaining psychological balance is the dream. Jung called this function compensation. The principle is simple and elegant. The dream always brings to the surface material that has been neglected, repressed, or devalued by the conscious attitude. It acts as a counterbalance, correcting the one-sidedness of the ego to lead us to a more complete and balanced view of ourselves and of life. Imagine a person who, in their waking life, is extremely logical, controlling, and skeptical. Proud of their rationality, their ego completely identifies with this stance. It is likely that their dreams will be filled with chaotic, emotional, magical, and irrational images. They might dream of emotional tsunamis, mystical rituals, or wild animals. The unconscious is not doing this to frighten them, but to compensate for their excessively narrow worldview. It is saying, look, all of this exists here too. You are ignoring half of the universe, half of yourself. This rigidity is killing you. If they ignore these messages, the compensatory energy might erupt into real life as a passionate and destructive love affair, or a nervous breakdown. The dream was the warning, the opportunity to integrate this energy consciously. Now, consider the opposite. A person who lives immersed in feelings, in a vague spirituality, who avoids the responsibility and logic of the material world. Their dreams might be surprisingly practical and structured. They might dream of taking a math test, building a house with precision, or receiving a detailed schedule from a demanding boss. The unconscious is trying to provide the structure, discipline, and contact with reality that is lacking in their conscious life. Compensation is not just about opposites. If our conscious attitude is excessively optimistic and naive, dreams might present us with our shadow, showing us the darker aspects of our nature to make us more realistic and humble. If we are inflated with a sense of self-importance, we might dream that we are small, lost, or being humiliated. The function of the dream is always to bring the ego back to earth, back to the center. This is a psychological diagnostic tool of inestimable value. By observing the recurring themes in our dreams, we can get an accurate picture of our conscious one-sidedness. The dream shows us what we are ignoring. It is the nightly State of the Union report for our soul. It asks us, where are you being too rigid? Where are you being negligent? What needs to be brought to light? Understanding the compensatory function frees us from the idea of good dreams and bad dreams. A terrible nightmare can be a good dream if it shocks us into confronting a dangerous truth we are avoiding. A pleasant dream can be a warning that we are falling into escapist fantasy. The goal of the psyche is not to make us happy, but to make us whole. Happiness is often a byproduct of the search for wholeness, a state of dynamic balance between opposites that dreams tirelessly strive to help us achieve. While most dreams are like daily letters from the unconscious, recurring dreams and nightmares are telegrams marked urgent. They are the psyche's alarm system, a desperate cry for attention to a fundamental problem that is being systematically ignored by consciousness. A recurring dream is like a patient teacher who repeats the same lesson night after night because the student is simply not getting it. The scenario may vary slightly, but the central theme, the emotion, the dilemma remains the same. Perhaps you repeatedly dream that you are unprepared for an exam, that your teeth are falling out, that you are being chased, or that you cannot find a bathroom. These dreams will not cease until the message is received and, more importantly, until a change in attitude or behavior occurs in waking life. The dream of the exam I didn't study for example, is rarely about school. It points to an area of life where we feel judged, inadequate, or unprepared to face an impending challenge. It could be a new job, a relationship, or a phase of life. The dream is exposing an inferiority complex and performance anxiety. It will only disappear when the dreamer confronts this feeling of inadequacy, perhaps by preparing better for their challenges or, more profoundly, by changing their perfectionistic and self-critical attitude. The recurring dream is a sign that psychic energy is blocked, circling around an unresolved complex. It is a knot in psychological development. Solving the dream's enigma is the key to untying this knot and allowing life's journey to continue. Nightmares are an escalation of this urgency. They are the unconscious's shock intervention. A nightmare occurs when the energy of a neglected complex becomes so great that it floods the ego, paralyzing it with terror. While in a common chase dream the ego can still run and fight, in a nightmare it is often immobilized, helpless. The monster, the murderer, the natural disaster, these are not just images, they are visceral experiences of annihilation. Although terrifying, nightmares can be incredibly healing. They are initiatory experiences that force us to face what we fear most. The nightmare is the moment when the shadow, ignored for too long, finally breaks down the door of consciousness. It forces us to look into the abyss. Often, the turning point in the analysis of a nightmare is to encourage the dreamer to imaginatively relive the dream and, at the moment of greatest terror, to stop fleeing, to turn and ask the monster, "What do you want from me?" Almost invariably, the terrifying figure transforms or offers a gift. The monster was a part of the dreamer's own strength, distorted by repression. Overcoming a nightmare is an act of immense courage that integrates a colossal amount of psychic energy. resulting in a growth of consciousness and personal strength. Therefore, instead of fearing them, we should learn to honor recurring dreams and nightmares. They are our fiercest and most loyal guardians, willing to terrorize us to save us from a much greater danger, that of an unlived, stagnant life, disconnected from our own wild totality. Once we accept that dreams are symbolic and compensatory messages, the practical question becomes, how can we understand them? If dream dictionaries are useless, what is the method? Jung developed a technique called amplification, which is radically different from Freud's free association. In free association, the patient is encouraged to associate freely from an element of the dream, moving further and further away from the original image, until a repressed personal complex is revealed. If the dream contained an eagle, the patient might associate to United States, then to freedom, then to an ex-boyfriend who moved to America, and so on. The focus is purely personal and moves away from the dream. Jung felt that this disrespected the wisdom of the dream itself. Amplification, in contrast, works like a spiral that delves deeper and deeper into the dream image itself. The goal is not to move away from the image, but to orbit it, illuminating it from all possible angles to understand its full meaning. The process has two layers. The first is personal amplification. The analyst or the dreamer themselves asks about personal associations with the image. Using the eagle example, what does an eagle mean to you? Have you ever had any experiences with eagles? How do you feel about them? What was it doing in the dream? This grounds the image in the unique life and psychology of the individual. Perhaps for this person, an eagle recalls a nature documentary that moved them, or the emblem of their football team, or a feeling of power and elevated vision. The second and most distinctive layer is collective or archetypal amplification. Here, we expand the context beyond the personal and ask, what has the eagle meant to humanity throughout history? We explore mythology, the eagle of Zeus, religion, the eagle as a symbol of the Holy Spirit or St. John, fairy tales, alchemy, art, and culture from around the world. We discover that the eagle is an almost universal symbol of spiritual power, transcendence, the ability to see the whole from a great height, the connection between heaven and earth. By gathering all this material, the small image of the eagle in the personal dream begins to vibrate with deep archetypal meaning. The dreamer realizes that their dream is not just about their trivial problems, but that they are dealing with a primordial energy. The dream might be inviting them to develop an eagle's vision regarding a problem in their life, to rise above the confusing details and see the overall pattern. Amplification is a method of respectful dialogue. It treats the dream image as a living, wise being. Instead of imposing an interpretation, we circle the image, offering it parallels and contexts, until its meaning begins to resonate within us. It is a more intuitive and artistic process than a scientific one. It requires curiosity, humility, and a vast knowledge of human culture. By practicing amplification, we learn to think as the unconscious thinks in patterns, connections, and images. It is like learning a new language. At first, it is difficult and slow, but over time, we begin to understand the flow and poetry of our own inner landscape, transforming dream analysis from an intellectual exercise into a living conversation with the soul. What is the ultimate goal of all this nocturnal exploration? Why does the psyche go to the trouble of sending us these complex, symbolic messages? For Jung, the answer is clear. Dreams are the primary guide in the process of individuation. Individuation is the central concept of Jungian psychology. It is the lifelong journey to become an individual in the deepest sense of the word, an indivisible, whole, and distinct unit from the mass psyche. It is not about selfish individualism, but the process of fully realizing our unique potential, of becoming who we were destined to be from the beginning. It is the journey of the acorn to become the majestic oak tree that already existed as a potential within it. In the first half of life, our task is to build a strong ego, adapt to the external world, create a persona, a social mask, and repress the aspects of ourselves that do not fit the shadow. This is the first half of life. However, around midlife, a crisis often arises. The goals that once motivated us, success, money, status, begin to feel empty. A yearning for deeper meaning emerges. This is the call to the second half of life, the call to individuation. It is the journey back inward, to rediscover and integrate all the parts of ourselves that were left behind. And dreams are the GPS for this dangerous and rewarding expedition. Dreams show us the next step. At the beginning of the journey, they may focus on making us confront our shadow, showing us the uncomfortable truths about ourselves that we need to integrate to become more honest and authentic. They will force us to look at our projections, to see how we blame others for our own shortcomings. Later, dreams may focus on integrating the anima or animus. They will guide us to develop our capacity for relationships, our creativity, our thinking, and our courage, withdrawing these qualities from the world of projections and anchoring them within us. They will show us how to balance the inner opposites, thinking and feeling, sensation and intuition, masculine and feminine. A person's dream series over time reveals a teleology, a purpose. The images develop, the themes evolve. A monster that once chased us may become an ally. A journey that seemed impossible begins to progress. Dreams document, step by step, the unfolding of our personal myth. The ultimate goal of individuation is the establishment of a conscious connection with the self, the archetype of wholeness and the ordering center of the psyche. The self encompasses both consciousness and the unconscious. When the ego, which once saw itself as the center of the universe, humbly submits to this higher authority, a new stability and a new sense of purpose emerge. In dreams, the self is often symbolized by images of wholeness and transcendence: the circle, the square, the cross, the mandala, a divine or royal figure, or the union of opposites, the alchemical conjunctio. Dreams do not give us a complete map from the start. They are like a GPS that only reveals the next turn in the road. They guide us through the twists and turns of life, warn us of dangers, point to hidden treasures, and above all, keep us true to our unique path. Individuation is Jung's answer to the question of the meaning of life. We are here to become conscious of who we are in our totality, and dreams are the most faithful of companions on this sacred journey. Let's move from theory to practice, exploring some common dream themes through a Jungian lens. Remember, these are not fixed interpretations, but rather directions for exploration that must always be adapted to the dreamer's unique life. Dream 1, losing teeth. This is an incredibly common and distressing dream. A Freudian interpretation might link it to castration anxiety. A popular view associates it with the fear of aging. From a Jungian perspective, teeth have multiple symbolic functions. They are our first tool of aggression, biting, and power. Losing teeth can symbolize a feeling of powerlessness in waking life, a loss of assertiveness or the ability to bite into life's problems. It may be related to a situation where we feel unable to defend ourselves or express our anger. Teeth are also essential for speech. Losing teeth can point to a communication difficulty. Words that were spoken thoughtlessly off the cuff or, conversely, important things that are not being said. Finally, teeth are part of our persona, our social mask, and our appearance. Dreaming that they fall out can indicate that our persona is disintegrating, that the image we present to the world is failing, which can be both frightening and a necessary prelude to greater authenticity. Dream 2, being chased. This is the quintessential nightmare theme. The first and most important question is, who or what is chasing me? Very often, the pursuer is a dark figure, a monster, or a criminal. This is a classic representation of the shadow. The dream is telling us that a part of ourselves that we have repressed is now demanding attention. The energy we invested in keeping this part in the dark has run out, and now it returns with a vengeance. Fleeing from it in the dream reflects our attitude in real life. We avoid confronting our anger, our envy, our fear, or our unrealized power. The dream will repeat, perhaps with the pursuer getting closer and closer, until we find the courage to stop, turn, and confront it. What would happen if you stopped running? This is the challenge the dream proposes. The pursuer can also be a representation of an external problem we are avoiding, or even a new potential that we are afraid to embrace. The key is always to examine the nature of the pursuer and the emotion we feel. Dream 3, flying. Flying dreams are generally euphoric and liberating. They represent a transcendence of the limitations of everyday life. Flying can symbolize an increase in consciousness, the ability to see things from a higher perspective, the eagle's vision. It can be linked to a burst of creativity a new idea, or a sense of spiritual freedom. However, the context is crucial. How are you flying? Is it a controlled and joyful flight, or an unstable and frightening one where you fear falling? An uncontrolled flight can be a warning that we are disconnecting from reality, becoming airy or inflated in our ambitions, losing touch with the ground. It could be a compensatory dream for a life that is excessively mundane and restricted, showing the dreamer their soul's yearning for freedom. Or if the dreamer has an escapist tendency, the dream might be critically reflecting this fantasy. Flying can also have connotations of power and superiority, and the dream may be exposing an inflation of the ego. The practical analysis of a dream is an art. It requires the dreamer to look at the dream from all angles, feel the emotions involved, and, above all, honestly connect it with what is happening in their life at the moment. The dream is not an abstract puzzle. It is the most pertinent and precise commentary on your current existential situation. After traversing the dark landscapes of the shadow, dialoguing with the mysterious figures of the anima and animus, and surviving the trials of the hero, where does the journey of dreams lead us? What is the final destination of this nocturnal navigation? Jung's answer is that all paths, all symbols, all dream narratives ultimately point to a center that is, paradoxically, also the entirety of the circumference. This is the self, the central archetype, the ordering principle of the entire psyche. The self is not the ego. The ego is the small center of consciousness, the part of us that says I. The self is the center of the total personality, including consciousness, the personal unconscious, and the vast ocean of the collective unconscious. It is our totality, our inner God. The journey of individuation, guided by dreams, is the gradual process by which the ego learns to relate to and, finally, to serve this greater center. It is the transition from being the arrogant captain of a small boat to becoming the humble navigator who reads the stars, the archetypes, and follows the ocean currents, the flow of life guided by the self. How do we recognize the presence of the self in dreams? It appears through symbols of totality, union, and paradox. The most famous of these symbols is the mandala, a Sanskrit word meaning circle. Mandalas, with their clear center and their quaternary structure, are spontaneous representations of the order and wholeness of the psyche. Dreaming of circular, square shapes, or the squaring of the circle, is a sign that the central ordering process is active. The self can also be personified. It may appear as a figure of higher and wiser authority, such as a king, a queen, a guru, or a divine figure like Christ or Buddha, regardless of the dreamer's religious affiliation. These figures represent the image of totality and perfection that the psyche is striving to achieve. Another powerful symbol of the self is the union of opposites, the conjunctio. Dreams that feature the marriage of the sun and the moon, the masculine and the feminine, heaven and earth, fire and water, are dreams of deep integration. They symbolize the reconciliation of the dualities that torment us in conscious life, pointing toward a state of inner unity. The final message of dreams, therefore, is one of hope and purpose. They assure us that, however chaotic and fragmented our conscious life may seem, there's an ordering principle working tirelessly in the depths, guiding us toward wholeness. The self is our innate destiny, the image of God within us. Dreams are the bridge the ego can cross to find the center. They are Ariadne's thread that guides us through the labyrinth of life, not out of it, but to its sacred heart, where we find not a monster to be slain, but our own face, complete and luminous, waiting for us since the beginning of time. The attentive listening to dreams is, ultimately, an act of devotion to this totality, a commitment to becoming what we already are in potential.